Did my water break or is it urine? That's what we're talking about today, mama. Your bag of waters, how do you know if it's amniotic fluid, and what you need to do. I'm Annabelle, RN, BSN, birth doula, and mama, and I'm here to build your confidence in birth. Subscribe to my channel and ring that bell to stay up to date to my latest content. Your bag of waters is like a big balloon inside of your uterus, and your baby is swimming around in this balloon because there's amniotic fluid. This allows baby to move freely during your pregnancy, and it allows that umbilical cord to move freely as well. That's where baby's getting oxygen and nutrients. So this is a good thing. But as moms move closer and closer to their due date, and they are term, so anywhere from 37 weeks gestation or more, that bag of waters starts to weaken. So think about the layers of the balloon, which are membranes. It's a 2-layer membrane. They just start to get a little bit weaker and weaker. And so that means that that balloon, that amniotic sac, has the potential to break. And it can break in 2 different ways. It can either break at the bottom, is where we see it a lot of times. That's what we think about, and a big gush of fluid can happen. When I say big gush, it's really not a lot more than 1/4 a cup. And so it's not as much as we think, but if we notice it in our underwear or on the floor or in our bed, it seems like a lot of fluid. So that's the gush, or the leak can happen at the top. It's a high leak. It's a little hole that happens, and so that fluid just starts to trickle a little bit at a time. And that's when it gets a little bit more gray. Is it amniotic fluid, or am I just leaking urine? And mama, I wanna encourage you right now, if through all of this and you do all these checks that I'm going to tell you, and you go to your doctor and they just say, yeah, you just peed your pants, don't be embarrassed. It happens to all of us. If it's your first pregnancy, it might just happen late in pregnancy. If you have had subsequent pregnancies, it might happen through the entire pregnancy. If you sneeze or cough, it happens. But let's do some checks to see if it's amniotic fluid or if it's pee. So if you notice this gush or this little bit of trickle, go to the bathroom. Probably don't need to tell you that, but go to the bathroom, and on your way, note the time. What time did you notice this might be my bag of waters has ruptured? When you go to the bathroom, you need to note the amount. Was it a gush? Are my underwear completely soaked, or was my pad completely soaked? Or was it just a little bit of a trickle that I was like, did I just pee myself, or was it amniotic fluid? I don't know. So the amount, we wanna know how much. Also, notice the color. This is very important. We want your amniotic fluid, or your pee, honestly, to be clear, maybe a little tan or yellow, but not green, not brown, not blood, no blood. I mean, maybe a little bit of blood if it was your mucus plug, and we have other videos for that, but large amount of blood, no. So note the color, and then also the odor, the smell. If it's amniotic fluid or even pee, it really should have no smell, but amniotic fluid has really no smell. Some moms say it's a little bit sweet, but really no smell. If it's a really bad smell, and you notice maybe it's a little green tinged or brown tinged plus the smell, that is not a good thing. That might indicate that there's meconium in the amniotic fluid, which means that baby might be in distress, maybe baby pooped, and that's what you're seeing is baby's poop coming out in your amniotic fluid, which can cause lung problems for baby. So that's something that is not good, and your healthcare provider needs to know about immediately. But that time, amount, color, and odor, very important, 4 things to note. So you've gone to the bathroom, you've noted these 4 things, you've changed your underwear, changed your pad. Is it amniotic fluid? I can't really tell. It's clear, no smell, it was just a little bit. What do you need to do? Well, this is where you put on that new pair of underwear, new pad, get up, don't sit back down, start walking around. Are you noticing that you're still trickling? Are you noticing that there's still amniotic fluid coming out because that leak is still there and there's still plenty of amniotic fluid to come out? That is how you know that it's amniotic fluid and not urine. Because if you continue to leak, you're probably not gonna continue to leak urine. You're very conscious of it now to hold your bladder, and so it's probably amniotic fluid. So what do you need to do? Well, if you are not term, if you're not 37 weeks or more, your doctor is going to have you come into the office most likely, and they might start with a vaginal exam, but if your cervix is closed, they're not gonna be able to feel if it is the amniotic sac or not. So they'll probably do an ultrasound and look to see, how does the amniotic fluid amount look? Do you still have enough? And is it still intact, or can we see that it is actually leaking somewhere? And they might swab your vagina or use a litmus test essentially to see, is it amniotic fluid or not? And then your healthcare provider will determine what the next step is for you. If you are term, you're 37 weeks or more, and you notice your amniotic fluid is leaking, but your contractions haven't started yet, what do you need to do? This happens to less than 10% of pregnant women, where their amniotic fluid is leaking but contractions haven't started. And research shows that 75 to 95% of these women, their labor will start within 12 to 24 hours. So rest assured and know confidently that if this happens to you, your labor will probably start within 12 to 24 hours. Especially if it was a gush, it was where the leak was at the bottom, because now all of a sudden baby is pressing on your cervix. There is not a buffer there anymore, so baby's pressing on your cervix, and that pressure is going to start to dilate and thin out that cervix and tell your brain to release oxytocin to cause contractions. So this can really speed along the labor process. And so if this happens to you, your amniotic fluid is leaking, contractions haven't started yet, call your healthcare provider, see what they want you to do. Some healthcare providers, because they know the research that shows that moms will usually start the labor process, say, okay, stay at home, monitor yourself for infection. They'll ask you what the amniotic fluid looks like, and they'll say, make sure that you don't develop a fever, chills. If the amniotic fluid starts to smell bad, call us, come into the hospital. But otherwise, stay at home, keep us updated, do some things at home, make sure that you're up, you're walking around, you're on your birthing ball, and you're doing things to prevent infection. Don't introduce anything into your vagina that could introduce infection up to baby, because that amniotic sac is not intact anymore. And so we don't want anything to penetrate and possibly cause infection to baby while you're at home. For moms that are group B strep positive, those moms that have amniotic fluid leaking, haven't had contractions start yet, your healthcare provider will probably tell you to come on into the hospital, and they'll want to check everything out, start you on antibiotics for your group B strep, and see how labor progresses from there. They might induce you with Pitocin, and that's something to have a discussion with about your healthcare provider if you want to go very natural in your birth and you don't want to be induced. How can we work around my water breaking? I'm group B strep positive, but I really want to get labor initiated and going very naturally. Now for my mamas who are in the midst of labor. You are the majority of mamas that will experience your water breaking in the active phase of labor. So a labor started, it went on for hours and hours and hours. You notice that your contractions are frequent, so they're coming every 2 to 3, 2 to 4 minutes. That this has been happening for over an hour, and the pain is increasing, and you know I am in the active phase of labor. You're at home and you might experience a feeling of a pop, or you might hear an audible pop. You check all the TACO, it's amniotic fluid. What do I need to do? This is the time to head to the hospital. Like I said, once that balloon pops, there is not a buffer between baby and your cervix anymore. So baby's going to be pressing on your cervix very evenly with a lot of power from those contractions pressing baby. You're gonna notice your contractions become more intense, and this is going to speed along the labor process pretty quickly. So I definitely recommend heading to the hospital at this point, because you are going to start pushing and give birth to your baby pretty quickly. If you live an hour or more away from the hospital, make sure that you talk to your doctor about their opinion before this situation comes up. Okay, doctor, if I'm in the labor process, if I'm in active labor, when should I come in? What if my water breaks before I actually am at the hospital? They might be comfortable with you laboring at home once your water breaks heading into the hospital, but you don't want to give birth to your baby in the car. It is a teeny tiny percent. It's honestly just those few videos that we see on YouTube here and there, but you don't want it to happen. So talk to your doctor about their opinion. Maybe they're comfortable with you laboring at home. Maybe they want you to come in before your water breaks. For my mamas that are laboring and laboring and laboring and their water never breaks, I do want to say a fun fact is that some babies are born ENCAUL, E-N-C-A-U-L. This means that babies are completely born inside of their amniotic sac. They honestly don't even know that they've been born, and then the doctor actually breaks the bag of waters outside of mom's womb, and then the baby's born. It's a very interesting thing if you want to look it up. But I do want to encourage the mamas that labor and labor and labor, they're in the active phase of labor and their water just doesn't break. And you have this mindset of, my water has to break because it's gonna speed along the labor process. How can this happen? When I was pregnant and when I gave birth to my son, I labored through the active phase of labor. I was in transition and my water still didn't break. My healthcare provider came in and asked if I wanted an amniotomy. This is where they artificially rupture my membranes. They use a tool that looks a little bit like a crochet hook. She put it into my vagina, up into my cervix, and nicked the bag. It didn't hurt the baby, didn't hurt me, and I was totally fine with that because I was having a natural birth, but everything was going smoothly and I was already about to push. So she broke that bag of waters. Immediately, baby came down on my cervix and I was able to start pushing after that. So that is an option for moms that maybe are on the fence about interventions. It is safe for baby and it is safe for mom, and you can decide if you want to be okay with your doctor doing that or not. For moms that, like I said, their sac broke, contractions haven't started, and your doctor is really encouraging induction for you to come into the hospital and for them to start Pitocin. It's a synthetic form of your normal oxytocin, and this causes contractions and speeds up the labor process or gets it going. If you just don't want that to happen, I encourage you to look at different studies and research, and I'll put them in the description below, about the fact that moms can wait for labor to start naturally. It is something that's kind of a gray area whether mom will develop an infection or won't develop an infection. But if you are healthy, your baby's healthy, and you're confident in your body's ability and you're confident in your ability to monitor for infection, you can talk to your healthcare provider about waiting for labor to start naturally. I hope this video gave you confidence about your amniotic fluid and the different situations that can happen in the labor process. Now's the time to take the next step with me towards your natural birth. Download my free workbook in the description below. I will see you in the next video.